Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew, Keith Johnson
All I have is my stink.
and Veronica Dashel.
Hi.
And tonight we're going to be talking about Orions in Star Trek, throughout Legacy Trek and into New Trek. And then after that, we'll be talking about the latest episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, Something Borrowed, Something Green. But
Huh.
before we get into that, uh, Keith, do we have any This Week in Trek this week?
Yeah, I got a couple of interesting things that I thought were relatively significant. This is the one we've talked about this before, but completely, most people, so many people still think that the first interracial kiss on television was from this episode, which we all know,
Okay.
which of course is Plato's Stepchildren. It
Right.
aired on September 17th, 1968. Of course, strictly speaking, it's not the first interracial kiss on television. That was
Right.
in Great Britain. It's not even the first interracial kiss between a black person and a white person. That was Nancy Sinatra and I
Hmm.
think Sammy Davis Jr. It's
Yeah.
not even the first interracial kiss with William Shatner. That is technically him and him and Franz Nguyen. But it's still a significant thing because, and I may have said this in one of our other shows, way back in the day, you probably know the studios were really concerned about the South,
Hmm.
and they were honestly concerned about the South. And I mentioned this before. I know he's not listening to this. I used to work with a guy from West Virginia. We talked about this episode once. He was a fan, and he said when it was heard that there was a rumored kiss between Kirk and Uhura, that his grandma and his granddad, like his whole clan, and I'm sorry for West Virginians, I don't mean that offensively, they were like wanting to go down and burn down the television studio just for a kiss. And it's sad
Right.
because it's a forced kiss on top of that. It's not a
Yeah.
romantic kiss. It's a forced one. And
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody listening to this show knows that Nichelle Nichols and William Shatner faked, or they blew the shots because the network was still tentative and they tried to make it a different kiss. And they
Right.
screwed up every take so badly they had to go with that one.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit last week, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, specifically, it's a shorthand. When people say the first
Hmm.
interracial kiss on television, what they're
Right.
talking about is the first interracial kiss between, a black person and a white person, a
Right.
romantic mouth-to-mouth kiss, not Nancy Sinatra giving Sammy Davis Jr. a peck on the cheek or that sort
Yes.
of thing. And I mean, frankly, at that time, things like people from Cuba or people from
Hmm.
Asia were less controversial
Yeah.
than between, Caucasian people and African American people. That
Mhm.
was the hot
Absolutely.
button thing. And so that it gets shorthanded a lot to the first interracial kiss on television. So people debate the semantics of that. But
Yeah.
I mean, specifically, that was sort of a taboo on television at that time
Hmm.
that, Star Trek had a big hand in pushing past. And I'm glad they did.
Mhm.
Yeah, same here. I think it's very interesting, Charles, what you said about the sometimes ludicrous gradations of what's acceptable. Like you said,
Right.
there was Ricky Ricardo and Lucy,
Yeah.
but he was Cuban, but he was a certain color Cuban.
Right.
There was also a thing for generations that basically when it was interracial between a black person and a white person, it was always a white guy and a black woman. If
Mm,
a black woman and a black man and a white woman, that was a different thing. So
Yeah.
there's all the, and of course we have that now when we talk about things like LGBTQA and stuff. Sometimes you have to laugh at the ludicrous nature of how
mhm.
people kind of parse what's
Yeah.
acceptable,
Yeah.
mixing of all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. There was a Doctor Who episode where they time traveled back to Selma, Alabama.
Uh,
And so, the man of African descent had to sit in the back, and the
mm-hmm,
doctor who presents as a white person sat in the front. But then
mm.
Yaz, who was of Pakistani descent, was like, "Where do I sit?" You know? It's just like, I don't know, sit down and see if they say anything.
Yes, there's truth to that. And also, Plato's Stepchildren, we keep the kiss, of course. It's also known by many, many fans as one of the worst episodes of the original series.
Yes.
Most people kind of sort of hate it because it's weird, it's strange, it's got S&M in it. I am still stunned that in 1968 they had hot pokers and whips coming at women on
Yeah.
television.
Right.
And it's one of the famous episodes banned in Great Britain for decades because of
Mm,
the violent content.
right. Yeah.
Okay, and another one move on. Here we go. Gosh, where's Matt Sweatman? And where's Alan? 20th of December, 1968, the premiere Brain, what is brain? Spock's Brain, of course, which is universally considered not a good episode, but it's so funny. It's a good, fun camp episode. It's not
Yeah.
like, oh, what's that horrible one? And the children shall lead that pretty much
Right.
everybody hates.
Yeah.
This one's fun.
Yeah, I've said this numerous times on the podcast. It's not a good
Hmm.
episode, but it's a fun episode.
Right. Yeah, and I can watch that anytime. I can sit down and watch that.
Yeah.
Another one I thought this was relatively significant for an interesting thing. You might say, why? What does this have to do with anything? On the 21st of September, 1974, the animated series episode The Practical Joker aired.
Okay.
Now, that is another one we go, okay, who cares? Because that's a horrible show. But there's two things about it. It did come up with a cool meme as posted by our own Charles the other day, which was Kirk to jerk.
Right. Right.
Sure. But also, it's significant for the thing they showed called the Recreation Room
Right.
on the Enterprise, which was basically a holodeck because it created environments and it even created snow. It could kill you in there. So that's the first actual showing of what we would later call the holodeck, even though the actual holodeck in production order was first mentioned in Next Generation and
Mm-hmm.
in chronology was first hinted at in Enterprise, the series.
Right. Yeah, and we actually featured that at Dragon Con. We did an adult show that mixed
Ah,
burlesque and puppets and comedy with Star Trek, and it was called
mhm.
What Happens in the Holodeck, and it was set around Reg Barkley's great grandmother, Regina Barkley, who setting up the holodeck on the original Star Trek, on the original Enterprise in 1701. So she was in all it was all TOS.
Nice. And the last thing I got, I actually want to do a birthday because this is a very important person. On 22nd of September, 1917, World War One time, Samuel Peoples was born.
Okay.
For those who don't know the original series much, Samuel Peoples was incredibly important to the original series. One thing is that everybody probably knows the original series was called, quote unquote, The Wagon Train to the Stars.
Right.
Well, Gene Roddenberry, bless his soul, did what Gene Roddenberry did. He claimed credit for creating that. The truth of the matter is Samuel Peoples came up with that idea at lunch one day where they were trying to do a pitch. And what a lot of people don't know is Gene Roddenberry's first pitch to the network went really badly because Gene Roddenberry, despite being a tall and kind of physically imposing man, was really soft-spoken and kind of insecure. And when they were trying to figure out what to do at lunch, Samuel Peoples said, "Oh, wow, just call it Wagon Train to the Stars," because this was the 60s and Westerns were popular. The other
Yep.
reason I know this is true is I checked, and this story came from none other than Harlan Ellison himself.
Oh wow.
And Harlan ain't giving nobody credit unless it's true. So,
Nope. Nope.
Right. And Samuel A. Peoples, he wrote the second pilot to the original series, which sold the show, and he also
yes,
wrote the first episode of the animated series.
isn't
So
that
I mean,
amazing?
we owe a debt to Samuel A. Peoples. He was very well known for writing westerns at that time.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so great about him is he was that connection of writing the second pilot and then the pilot animated series. The only interesting thing about it is Gene Roddenberry was so impressed and so grateful with what Samuel Peoples had done for him. He offered him to be the line producer on the series.
Oh.
Peoples turned it down because he wanted to do two other shows, which were two westerns that nobody remembers today. But scrambling around, Gene Roddenberry got his second choice, which was Gene Kuhn, to become the
Wow.
producer of
Yeah.
Star Trek.
I mean,
And,
if you're in working in television 1965, 66, I mean,
mhm,
doing a western does seem like a safer bet than a science fiction
yes,
series.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's this week in Trek history. And I do have one quick bit of news, but
Okay. No, go ahead with your news too. I have one too. Go
okay.
ahead.
I was gonna say this just in. Very short Trek sucks. Okay, back to you, Charles.
Well, I was gonna say, this is one that Alan sent to me. He couldn't be here tonight.
Awesome.
He's being a rock star right now. But there's a new Lower Decks Wordle game called Decked. And if you go to Paramount
Mhm.
plus.com/decked, that's DECKD, and it's a Wordle game, and there's a word from the latest episode of Lower Decks. And I have no idea how Wordle works. I don't play
Me
Wordle or
either.
Hurdle or any of that. So if you are a Wordle person and you like Star Trek, go check out Decked and let us know if it's good, if it's fun. You know, I don't know what you do.
Yeah.
I'm not a video
Yeah.
game guy.
It's literally you guess letters and it
Oh,
tells you, oh, these are wrong, or this is
okay.
wrong, but it's in the wrong spot, and hey, this one's in the right character in the right spot, and then you have to kind of
Okay.
figure it out, and you get like 5 tries or something.
Well,
Yeah.
fun. Okay. Well, now you mentioned very short treks. Do we want to talk about the latest episode of Very Short Treks before we get into our topic for today?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Veronica.
So I actually found this one slightly amusing.
Okay.
I didn't think it was super terrible.
Okay.
I mean,
Slightly-
it was stupid potty humor basically,
Yes.
but I wasn't like, what? So it was a little gross.
Was it that you found it better, or that Very Short Treks has lowered your expectations?
Probably lowered my expectations. If I had seen this without having seen the others, I'd probably be like, what are they doing? But
Okay.
in comparison, I thought it was better, and I really enjoyed the joke about the reheating the fish in the break room,
Okay.
because that's a thing in offices, is someone reheats fish in the break room and it smells like that for the next week.
To Charles's question about how you phrase that, Veronica, there's Matt Sutton, where are you? There's an episode of Cheers where Sam is saying something about being good looking, and my God, Diane, not wanting to say that, says, "Well, you're rather unrepugnant." And Sam goes, "Yeah, that's what the ladies say. Oh, unrepugnant Sam." And so when you said it wasn't the worst, it wasn't whatever, because I kind of hated it personally.
Yeah.
I just hated it, and not even because it was the gross humor, although I'm not into booger humor and all that weird stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It honestly just doesn't seem like anybody who's watched Star Trek
Yeah.
knows it. It feels like they
Because
just
that's not what
Yeah.
Riker would have done in that
No.
case. Riker would
Not
have
at
been
all.
like, all right, finger up the nose, let's shake hands.
yes. I mean, and all you gotta do is look at Lower Decks to get someone who gets it and makes
Yeah.
fun of it, or laughs at it, but even laughs at it lovingly. This is a horrible analogy. This is like when somebody takes a famous person and puts them in a porn film and just changes the name, or so I've heard. And, and there's no resemblance to the real life person. They just have the name. Because I'm watching this, and it's like, it's not even Star Trek. It's not even funny. It's not even good satirical Star Trek.
Right.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And yeah, we should say that again. That, I mean, it's all subjective.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and part of the
absolutely.
fun of discussing things is sometimes you agree and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Like I remember in the first season of Strange New Worlds, Veronica loved the Elysian Kingdom. It was her favorite episode of the season. Keith said he would never watch it again. But that makes it fun to have a discussion about it.
Yes.
If we all just
Absolutely.
agree all the time, so some folks enjoy it. For me, Very Short Treks is. I said this just on Facebook today in a comment on one of Benny Beth's posts that.
Mhm.
I mean, it makes me appreciate Mike McMahon all the more because
Yes.
Lower Decks could have been this week to week.
Yes.
That's true.
That's what
You know?
that's what I was worried about when they
Right.
first
That's
did it,
true.
because this kind of humor is what Rick and Morty is a lot of the time.
Well, I think
Oh,
Rick and
it
Morty
is.
is more clever,
It is more clever, but it veers towards this more than it does.
but I agree with you
Other
that
Amazing.
I think the Riker that we know from the show, if a guy stuck his finger in his nose and said, "This is our custom to shake hands," and I think that Riker would have stuck his finger in his nose and shook his hand.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. I mean, it's for somebody. It's not necessarily for me.
Mhm.
But I don't know. It is what it is.
Yeah.
You know.
And we
Yeah.
have our first comment for the evening. Yay! Our
Hey.
buddy William, and I
Bill
apologize, Bill Lamond.
Yep.
Lamond. I'm glad, because I was about to say I don't remember how to pronounce her name, and we've asked before, and you told us, and I had forgotten. So hi, Bill.
Okay, and what's Bill's comment?
He says, "Hi all. Sorry I'm late,
That's all right, Bill.
but you are late on time because you were the first comment."
That's right.
That's okay, Bill. We blow our noses in your general direction as a sign of affection.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure who the target audience for these Very Short Treks is. It's not my first, and so I said this in our Facebook group. This could potentially be the final performance for Jonathan Frakes and Gates McFadden as their characters.
Yeah.
Wow.
After 30 plus years of playing these characters, this could be the final their final performance.
Yep.
What a scary thought.
Right?
Right? So I like I said, it's not hitting the mark for me. If you're out there and you enjoy very short treks, great. But I'm it's not my kind of show.
Mm-mm.
I
Charles,
got to be honest.
Charles, you should tweet that could be their last performances, and Terry Metalis will see it and go, "Hell no, I got to do something else."
Right.
Series.
Now they have to do Legacy or a
Yeah.
movie or Picard season 4. This can't be
Yeah.
it for the next generation crew.
Yeah, and I always, as a personal thing, I always tell people, because sometimes people think I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to certain things. Like, folks,
Yeah.
I will watch the Three Stooges.
Yeah.
I'll watch
Yeah.
The Warriors, that goofy movie, which is great. It is not lowbrow humor. That's the problem. But I think what you said about Mike McMahon, Charles, is correct. It's good lowbrow humor. Or Lower Decks is not lowbrow, but kind of slapstick. And you realize how hard it is to do that kind of humor when it's done badly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
And you can do it well. I mean,
Mhm.
like Blazing Saddles has a very famous fart
Yes.
sequence.
Yes.
And fart
Yes.
sequences are not known for highbrow humor,
Yes.
but it can be done. And I mean, I follow probably like 4 or 5 different Three Stooges Facebook groups and pages.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I mean, and that's a lot of people slapping each other,
Yes.
but sometimes it's done well and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Yes. So, like I said, it wasn't for me, but I did look at when I watched it on YouTube today. I looked at the comments, and I got to tell you, I read 30 comments, 25 were positive.
Well, good. Okay.
Even excellent. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Not for me.
Yeah, and that happens. Like I mean, Keith likes Star Trek Enterprise a lot. I do not.
Yeah.
But that's a basis for conversation.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Good. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So our topic tonight, we wanted to talk about Orions. You know what? We got some comments. Let's hit the comments before we get into the topic.
Yeah. So our buddy
Alright.
Bill says he's only seen one episode of Lower Decks a few years ago, and he loved it. That is great, Bill. We were in this particular instance talking about short treks.
Very short treks.
Very short treks.
Yep.
Which in your next comment, you said you don't have any idea how to find any current trek. Well, if you want to watch the very short treks, it is on the Paramount Plus YouTube.
Right.
I don't know if they still have the Strange New World season 1 on there.
I don't know,
the
but
first episode of season 2 or something like that.
But Bill, their habit has been to, as the new season comes out, they'll put the previous season on YouTube in a lot of cases. So I think the previous season of Lower Decks is on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
So I would check
definitely it out.
the Star Trek on Paramount Plus YouTube page and see what they've got available. They may still have Lower Deck. I mean, they may still have Strange New Worlds on there, but I think they do have the previous season of Lower Decks as well. But also, if you get Pluto TV, they've been streaming a lot of things for free on Pluto TV here and there as well.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah.
All right, what we got next?
Very good
All right.
idea. People
We
get
got our
lost.
our buddy Anthony Williams. He said Keith is hitting on some great points. There are people who dislike Lower Decks because they think that Star Trek should be serious. I'm not one of those, but I personally think that very short treks is silly trek done badly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We strongly agree with you, Anthony.
Well, let the
And
church
he
say
also
amen.
added that Keith is a man of taste for his enjoyment of Enterprise.
All right. Thank you. You hear that, Charles?
I heard it.
Oh,
Great.
man. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, our topic tonight, before we get into the latest episode of Lower Decks, that'll probably come around the 35-minute mark of our show, but we wanted to talk about the history of Orions in Star Trek. Because I mean, Orions, for a race that was introduced going back to the pilot, I mean, that was one of the very first Star Trek races that was introduced. The original pilot of Star Trek had the Orion Animal Woman, that Vina was portraying in the Illusions, but they were not super developed over the course of 40 years, but they live large in people's recollections. So we wanted to talk a little about how the Orions have been portrayed up to this point.
Yeah, they've pretty much just been portrayed as pirates and seduction people. I don't know.
In a lot of cases,
seductresses.
Yeah. But really there's a big gap between the original series, because they really didn't delve much into Orions. But that was, part of the mandate of Next Generation was that they were deliberately not bringing back a lot of the original series races. I mean, there weren't a whole lot of Vulcans, but there weren't, I mean, there were very few Andorians and Tellarites and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But on the original series, I mean, in the cage, you don't actually get an Orion. You get Vina in
Yeah.
disguise as an Orion in an illusion. And then later on, you got Yvonne Craig portraying an Orion.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think one of the things about the Orions, which is very interesting, and of course, again, we're talking the 60s, is the first introduction of Vina. There's even the whole discussion in Captain Pike's quarters where he talks about giving up being a starship captain. And he says something which, of course, sure as heck wouldn't go today. He said he might go to the colonies, I think the Rigel colonies, or the
right.
Orion. And the doctor
Mm-hmm.
says, you a whatever, you are a trader dealer in green animal women slaves, and
Right.
she is portrayed as a slave woman. And then they talk about how they're almost like what we think of as Deltons, which is an interesting analogy. How
Mm.
almost no man can resist them. So they were really, as Veronica said, they were portrayed as seductresses and really almost animal women. And then,
Mm-hmm.
of course, when Yvonne Craig showed up as
Mhm.
Marta, in whom Gods destroy, it was still more of that. She was doing the dance, and it was all about the seduction. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't really see Orion men yet, and you didn't know anything else about them other than that. And then,
Yeah.
of course, was it what this Journey to Babel
Yeah.
mentioned there?
Yeah,
So,
and I guess technically we got an Orion in Journey to Babel, even though he was disguised as an Andorian.
right, right. Yeah, this is true. And I remember being a kid. When I first watched Star Trek, my memory, I was 8. I may have watched it before that because my older brothers watched it. So it might have been in the ether. But I was 8, and I remember the green Orion slave woman it was a thing. They seemed so exotic. I don't usually use that word. They seemed so
Right.
strange. Um, and you didn't know what to make of them. That's all we knew about them at that point in time until Journey to Babel, as you mentioned.
Yeah. And at least with Yvonne Craig's character, she had
Mhm.
the additional, I guess, interesting because she was insane. You know, like she
Yeah.
was crazy.
Right.
So
Right.
she wasn't just seducing, but she was like a
Hmm.
crazy Orion woman. So it's
Yes.
like she would like quote Shakespeare and say she wrote it. And he's like, well, Shakespeare already wrote it. And she's like, well, I wrote it too. You know, and things like that. It kind of made her charming, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And my favorite when she's getting ready, and characters get ready to make out with her or let her make out with him, and she pulls the knife out and she says,
Right.
yeah, he's my lover. I have to kill him. Like, okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, in the animated series, we got the Orions.
Yes. The Orions.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
They were kind of blue.
Mhm.
And they were the Orions. We watched that just recently. We talked about it in our animated series
Yep.
discussion. But
Yes.
I mean, on one hand, it's good that they're bringing back an original series species, you know,
Mhm.
and developing them further. I don't that's an episode that for me that doesn't hold up as much. It's more boring than I remember it
It
being.
is.
I remember it
Yeah.
being Kirk fighting an Orion on an asteroid for half an hour, but it's not.
Right.
It's a lot of messing around on the ship and talking about a plague for the first 17
Right.
minutes or something.
Yeah. The only thing that animated episode did, to see your point, is it built on the mystery of the Orions because in Journey to Babel, as you said, we didn't actually. Well, we saw he was an Orion pretending to be an Andorian, but the only thing was we just had mysteries because what we find out, of course, in Journey to Babel is that the Orions were behind the attacks on the Enterprise and on Captain Kirk, and all you find out in that episode is that the Orions literally wanted to start an interstellar war so they could sell the lithium to everybody and make
Right.
a profit. And so it
Yeah.
built on this mystique of these people who seem to be somewhat sinister, maybe pirates, a syndicate basically. But I don't
Sure.
think the term syndicate had come up yet, right? That word.
No. Yeah, that was DS9
Mm,
that introduced the Orion Syndicate. But that's a good segue because I mean, we really didn't, as far as on screen, we
Mm-hmm.
didn't get
mhm.
much more of Orions until the Orion Syndicate. They were in the books.
Oh,
The Star Trek books are always good about that sort of thing. They don't. The book writers never forget. You know, anything that's been on Star Trek is fair game. But they went back to the Orion Syndicate on DS9. Now you had those green guys on DS9, which I wasn't even at the time sure if they were Orions because they had like 4 nostrils and kind of strange noses and that sort of thing.
oh
They had
yeah,
updated makeup.
right.
And I'm still not sure if those guys are supposed to be Orions, but maybe they're somewhere in that family.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But we started getting comments about the Orion Syndicate in DS9.
Yeah. There was an episode with were they introduced with O'Brien? Was that when was? I don't know if
I
that was when we first heard the term or
I
not.
don't know if that was the when we first heard the term, but that was the one that leaps out to me in my memory is
Mhm.
O'Brien having to like go undercover. Because of course you'd the chief engineer of a space station is who you'd tap to go on an undercover spy mission.
Yes. Right.
That makes sense.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but really like the next gen era is sort of just devoid of Orions until you get to Enterprise.
That's true. You're right. And then you're right. We had nothing on Next Gen. We had Deep Space Nine, which, as you said, I don't know if we ever really saw the Orion, but it deepened the mystique because you saw
Right.
all these different races, and you heard about the Orion Syndicate, and you heard how afraid people were of
Right.
crossing the Orion Syndicate.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
obviously some kind of big Alpha Nostra kind of thing, or even like the Dominion, where they would go, oh, it's them. But again, you hadn't seen anything. You're right
Right.
until Enterprise.
Yeah. So Enterprise brought him back and kind of retconned the Orions a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get one quick comment before we get too
Sure.
far away from
And we've got
what we said.
several comments, so we can't necessarily read all of them. But go
Yeah.
ahead.
I'm trying to keep to the ones that are kind of relevant to what we're talking about, but Bill, I'm seeing all your comments. I'm going to try and reply to them in the chat at some point. So Bill says, I've only seen the animated series in the first broadcast. I don't remember that they pronounced Orion in that way. Did they really?
Yes.
Yes.
They 100%
They
called them
did.
Orions.
Yeah. I don't know how they got away with that. Like what?
And I said that during our animated series discussion, but that doesn't
Yeah.
bother me because everyone says Orions.
Yeah.
And all those
Yeah.
characters are in Starfleet and they're in the 23rd century. So they know. Like, I'm probably wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
As long as everyone does it, I'm fine with it.
Right. And Bill, that really went down to the point that the animated series, honestly, pretty much everything you see was done in one take.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they just went. Yeah, they directed. There was one take, and I've listened to some of the voice actors, and they say, "Can I do that again?" No, it's fine. Keep going.
Well, I mean, good for them for everyone saying Orions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I mean, I guess whoever said it first pronounced it, and from there on
Mhm.
out, it was Orions. Or unless it was a directorial choice, the director may have said, or I mean, it could have been written. That could have been the pronunciation guide for the script.
Yeah.
I
It
don't know.
was.
And they probably
I-
just honestly didn't remember it because it's something that they did years ago and don't
Right.
remember having that character in there. Fans remember, but
It really was, and I forget who, and I want to blame Shatner, but I can't slur at Shatner, but it really was one actor or person said it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And by then, there were many times where Shatner was literally like in a hotel room in New York just doing his lines, so they weren't always in the studio together. And to your point, one person, Shatner or somebody, said Orion and their whatever you call it, their voice track.
Right.
Then someone else heard it and they started doing it. And then the other people came in to read. They said, "Are you sure that's right?" And they go, "Well, I don't know. That's what he said it. Let's just do it." So
Yeah. I mean, the important thing in that situation is just everyone's consistent.
yeah.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
true. Very true.
But yeah, on Enterprise, I mean, up to Enterprise, it's sort of the thought was that these Orion women were the slaves. They're the animal women slaves that no man can resist. But Enterprise tried to sort of flip that on its head and say that
Mhm.
the women were actually the ones who were running the society.
Yeah.
So what did you think about that, Veronica?
I like that flip.
Okay.
I like that they continue that as canon. I found that really interesting, and it's not a thing you saw in a lot of the Star Trek aliens. I mean, a lot of them it was the male-led culture,
Mm.
regardless, or occasionally you'd get where there wasn't any difference, and they were just people. But more often than not, most of the aliens were the males are in charge.
True.
I mean, because that's how it was in the 60s, especially. And even in the late 80s and early 90s, that was still a lot of the things.
mean,
So
you
I
s-
really like that they flipped that.
Yeah, I mean, you say that though, but I mean, we did in the '60s get like T'Pau, who was the big matriarch on Vulcan, and we
Mhm.
also got the Romulan commander. So at least
Yeah.
Romulan Vulcans, I think that's pretty good for that time of having women in charge
Yeah.
in positions of power in that society.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Enterprise Orions to me sort of struck me as we want to still do sexy Orion ladies, but not
Right.
be called sexists. So how do we do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't, and it didn't. Now we're going to get there, obviously, but it didn't work for me until Lower Decks, believe it or not, fleshed it out for me.
Okay.
Because having an entire gender controlled because the other gender emits pheromones on the way it was kind of presented in Enterprise didn't make sense to me. It's kind of like some dude would get on a spaceship like, man, I'm just getting away from these women for a minute, and his head would clear. But on the way Enterprise presented it, they didn't say it, but it's almost like the men walk around as zombies 100% of the time. And I kept thinking, well, that pheromones alone is not going to be enough. Because again, somebody's just going to get away, he's going to put a gas mask on or something like that.
Sure.
And so it kind of sort of didn't work. And as you said, Charles, they were doing the other weird thing that the conceit in Enterprise was that the Orion women were literally going into the galaxy everywhere, controlling things by presenting themselves as slaves and basic prostitutes. And even then, I thought, that ain't gonna work with every culture. That kind of ain't gonna work. So it was interesting, and they took it to a better place, I think, in Lower Decks. But I still did like them because they built on the mystique of the Orions because they were slave traders. And that was kind of interesting in Star Trek to see, of course, not humans, but to really build up this race that is decidedly not like what we consider to be a race engaged in any kind of practices we like. So I did like the fact that they built on this background of them as slave traders and drug traders and all kinds of stuff that they were doing behind the scenes.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes back to a line, I guess, from the Cage when they say no man can resist them. I was like, well, if no man can resist them, why are they the slaves? So I could see fleshing that out and trying to do something with it. It didn't 100% work for me on Enterprise. I did like, though, when the Orions finally showed up. I remember, like, in the earlier season, like I think it was season 2 of Enterprise, when there were these like Marauders and they were Nausicaans, and I was mad at the time, like, why are they flipping Nausicaans from Next Gen when they should be like a pre-TOS society? This should be the Orions. So when they did finally do the Orions, I was glad they were doing the Orions at least. Enterprise had a problem for a little bit there of going back to the TNG races when I didn't feel like they should at that time.
Oh, like the Ferengi.
Right, and the Borg and that sort of thing.
And that Enterprise episode, at least if you're talking about when the 3 women came on board and they were basically dancing and sashaying and taking over the ship. Again, it some ways it was a little hokey, but it had some humor because all they did was gave T'Pol a headache. And I think Dr. Phlox kept having to give himself stimulants because it wasn't affecting him as controlling him, but it was making him feel uncomfortable. So they still need to flesh them out a little better.
And then when they brought them back on Discovery, now I didn't really care for what they did with the makeup, because instead of just painting people green, they over-engineered it and tried to give them whole face prosthetics. So everyone was like Arnold Schwarzenegger or something. Like everyone had that kind of face, But one thing they did that I really liked, I thought was pretty clever, was that when they went to the 32nd century, and the first people you meet are an Orion and an Andorian who are working together as part of this syndicate. Which, I mean, when those races were really introduced on the original series in Journey to Babel, that was a big thing. Like the Orions were on our side, and the Andorians were on our side, and the Orions were the bad guys. So I thought, going into the future and finding out the future is different because you have an Orion and an Andorian on the same side for the Emerald Chain. I thought that was pretty clever.
Same here, but I agree with you. Even now, when I think about, I forget the main bad guy, the Orion lady from Discovery. I remember that the makeup just didn't look right.
Yeah, they over-engineered it. They didn't want to just paint somebody green, so they made a whole like face prosthetic,
and it looked like slick, and
they had rubber heads.
Yeah, they look like rubber heads. And they didn't. They looked more like lizards.
Yeah, but I almost forgot we did see an Orion district on Kronos on Discovery at the end of season 1, and that's where you had Ron Howard as an Orion. Was when they went. Do you remember that they went to the Orion district at the end of season 1 of Discovery on Kronos, and there was
that got blocked from my brain.
You don't remember that?
No.
Clint Howard.
I'll probably watch it and be like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Clint Howard, is that you meant?
Clint Howard. Yeah, Ron Howard wasn't in it. Yeah, it was Clint Howard. You're right about that.
I remember. Did y'all like Discovery's Orions? For some reason, even though they fleshed them out more, they didn't leave much of an impression with me, long lasting. I'm not sure why.
No, I mean, I like the Emerald Chain idea.
Yeah.
But they did what a lot of modern Star Trek does, which end of season, story over. when I felt like they should have continued and fleshed it out.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
would have loved to see more from that character.
Well, for
'Cause
instance,
she
like
was
how
interesting.
yeah, like how might the whole 10C situation in season 4 have turned out if the Emerald Chain was still a major power?
Yeah.
Right.
You know? And like I felt like and I'm blanking on her name as well, but that Orion lady who was in charge of the chain, I felt
Mhm.
like she finally got interesting in that scene where she showed up at Starfleet Command and she wanted to negotiate to join Starfleet.
Yeah.
And she had that great interaction with Admiral Vance.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, she's getting interesting.
Mhm.
And so, of course, the next episode, they kick her off of a ledge like Darth Maul, you know, like because that's what you do. Whereas I feel like it would have been more interesting if she'd have continued on in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I agree
Or
with
at least
that.
continued the Emerald Chain along, because I mean, it seems like someone would just step up and take her place, and wouldn't just
You would think.
because that's how big bad corporations work. The head person dies, okay, whatever. The next person's gonna step right up and take their place.
It's I mean, it's people who grew up with Star Wars. Like, oh, Emperor's dead. I guess the Star Wars over. Everybody stand down.
Yeah,
you would think
because
in this day and age that they would know that no, they're not gone. It's not gone. It's not gone.
Right.
Yeah. Star Wars
Yeah.
has proved that it's not actually gone.
Yeah.
I agree, Veronica, and also the Orions and their culture is something that by Discovery's time, it's been this way for centuries.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. That's their culture, it appears. So yeah, one person wouldn't be that important in the chain.
Yeah. Well, that's going to bring us up to Lower Decks, and Lower Decks has done some of the best work, I think, on the Orions. But before we get into that, because we won't be able to talk about this without getting into spoilers for the latest episode.
Mhm.
So if you're listening on the audio podcast, we'll take a quick break right here and promote a fellow ESO Network podcast show. But don't go away, because when we come back, we'll be talking about the Orions on Lower Decks, as well as the latest episode, Something Borrowed, Something Green. So stay right there. And if you're watching with us live, we'll just continue on. So, Veronica, you want to throw out a spoiler warning?
Boop, boop, boop. Spoilers. Boop, boop. Spoilers.
Perfect.
Spoilers.
And that's spoilers for up to and including Lower Deck season 4, the episode Something Borrowed, Something Green,
Mhm.
which came out today, which I flippin' loved.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I loved
Same
seeing
here.
Tendi in her previous culture and trying to cover it up and how embarrassed she was over everything.
What did you think of it, Keith?
I loved. This is weird. I loved the A story. The B story was just okay to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought the B story was pretty hilarious myself.
Yeah.
But
It was hilarious, but
Yeah.
it wasn't like great. Like
Like,
the
yeah,
A story
the
was.
B story could easily have been Jake and Nog,
Yes.
I thought.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I just love the whole thing with them going to the holodeck and like they're both Mark Twain. So they're both terrible Mark Twains, but
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It must be fun to be an actor and you get to do the thing that actors do sometimes when they're trying to be serious, which is fake a bad accent. I do the class, huh? You know, I mean,
Right.
think about it, you don't even have to be good at it because that's
Yeah.
the whole point. Yeah, I didn't dislike the B story, but this is one time I kind of wish the A story had been the only story because every time they jump back, I kind of want to go back to Tendi because again, it's ironic that Lower Decks is fleshing out the Orions in ways that I like and actually kind of fill in those gaps that I was wondering about and
Mhm.
some of the doubts
Yeah.
I had. Because Lower Decks has kind of addressed the point of it's not that the women control the men every second of every day. They can hit them with these pheromone bursts. It's as you were saying, Veronica, it's their culture.
Yeah.
I think bolstered by and started with the pheromones, but it's obviously their culture. You can tell men have been acculturated to be scared of the women.
Right.
Because again, again, a guy could put on a gas mask or a spacesuit and get away from them, but that's their culture. It's a female-dominated society, and I actually kind of like that. Despite all the joking, you see some of the thought that they put into them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that every Star Trek show has done is
Mhm.
you make one of the existing races, whether it be Klingon or Ferengi, part of the main
Mhm.
cast, and then
Mhm.
flesh it out.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
challenge is to flesh it out in a way that feels consistent with what we've seen
Yes.
before,
Mm-hmm.
but builds upon those characters. And I love that they're doing that with the Orions. And I love that they're taking, I mean, it's a comedic show,
Yeah.
so it's going to be
Yes.
funny, but they're
Mhm.
also taking it seriously. It's not just jokes.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, they're really like delving into Orion lore in
Mhm.
this. And I love the bit they walked it back a little bit with the Orion women being in control with the pheromones. You know,
Yeah.
some Orion women can, not
Yes.
all Orion women do.
Right.
And I love the line where it's like, no, Starfleet said they just made that up. They had to come up with something to explain how a bunch of Orion showgirls like took command.
That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, but having fun with the lore that exists too,
Mhm.
and I thought it was really well done. I love the portrayal of Orion. I love
Mhm.
that. I mean, when you first get there, it's just like a palatial estate and a dude riding a rhinoceros. Like it's a really nice place, and then you
Yeah.
go to a
Yeah.
city and a club, and then you go to the underbelly. Like you sort of different layers
Yeah.
of Orion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When we first saw them flying there and Tandy first talking, I was thinking about this is another thing. I was thinking about we could do a show one day on all the aliens in Starfleet who are ashamed of their heritage or kind of
Right.
sort of want to be more human than their own because, right or wrong, Tandy's ashamed of her heritage. And I'm not saying
Sure.
her heritage is something she should be embracing. We find out she's trained to be an assassin, but that's just an
Right.
interesting thing about Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
can tell that that was something they had planned for her from the beginning because
Mhm.
that even in season 1, that stuff like that was showing up with Tendi.
Yeah. That's been seeded all through the show up to this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
Mhm.
that is a satisfying reveal when you
Yes.
finally find out answers and it lines up with what you've seen so far. I mean, you think about the DS9 episode where that guy
Mhm.
who was like, and she was like, no, it's not cool to be a pirate. But then when it comes down to it, and she just like beats everybody up and hijacks a ship,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
it's part of her upbringing.
Yeah.
It's less satisfying when you get the reveals and you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
I really enjoyed the lower decks Orions at the beginning of the episode. That
Mhm.
was interesting, and they were talking about how you can't just tattoo a chain. You have to earn them.
That was great.
Yeah. Now, yeah, I mean that's a good thing to throw out there though, because we got another little tease of this mysterious alien ship that's just
Mhm.
blowing everybody up.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's basically the same scene every time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I have enjoyed seeing the different cultures on these ships just flying around in space.
Yeah.
We got one
Right.
with the Klingons, we got one with the Romulans, now with the Orions.
Mhm.
I like just getting this little glimpse of just the folks that are just out there on ships putting around the galaxy.
Yeah. And this wasn't even an Orion pirate ship. They said they were an Orion cargo vessel, basically.
Right.
Pirate
He was
adjacent.
and then he said he was a plunder sorter.
Right.
Yeah.
He sorts the plunder. I love that. That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And remember a couple 3 weeks ago when one of the ships blew up, I said something like, "Are we sure everybody on the ship was dead?" Well, they showed the people disintegrating today. So
Yep.
Unless
Yeah.
they're being beamed.
Oh, good point.
You never
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
There's always a
yeah.
possibility that it's a transporter built into that thing. Who knows?
They're going
Oh,
around
yeah.
collecting alien species.
Could be.
Mm,
Could be.
mhm.
Or they could just be blowing them up.
Yeah. But I
But
thought it was good. It's good. And I like the music at the start of that episode too. It kind of sort of sounded like when the Klingon bird of prey appeared in Searcher's Fall.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and one thing I enjoyed about the Orions in this episode is that you got
Mhm.
Orions that were very different shades of green.
Mhm.
You know,
Yes.
which
And different hair colors.
and that could
Yes.
just be because it's boring if everybody on screen is exactly the same color.
Mhm.
Yes.
Just visually. But I
Mhm.
mean,
That
you
makes
think
sense.
I thought about the Orions, like those
Yeah.
guys were more blue.
Yeah.
But you could have. I mean, it would make sense to have different ethnicities amongst the Orions and variations in skin color. I think they're not all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been an issue Star Trek and so much science fiction deals with. I agree with you because everybody was the same skin tone,
Right.
and it seems kind of weird why that would be the case.
Yeah.
So, okay, I wondered if that was me. I only got to watch the episode once,
hmm
and I had gone to personal stuff. I gone to the eye doctor today, and I was looking like, man, my eyes still jacked up, or are those people with different skin color, skin tones? Actually, Rolf, I just said that. I actually wrote a big question mark. Is it me or are they different shades?
No, let your doctor know they really were different skin tones.
Cool.
But we found out that Tendy's family is the 5th largest family on Orion.
Which is
Only.
a big deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Only.
barely.
Barely.
Yeah.
Barely. Yeah.
That
Yeah,
seems like,
I mean, she's a
yeah.
pretty well-to-do family.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's like being the 5th richest person in the United States.
Yeah.
That's not a minor thing.
No, nothing
No.
to sneeze at.
Wow. Yeah,
Um,
and And I love it. What was the thing Merida made the joke about? Everybody seems to love to ride or be carried around or something like that. Because her
Yeah,
parents seem
everywhere you go, they're being carried around on one of those like daises.
Platforms.
yes.
Yeah.
I think is
That
what they
was
call them.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed meeting her parents.
Hmm.
And you could and what was her dad's name?
It was like Bert,
Yeah.
which in our Star Trek
Yeah.
show, I had a character called Baab.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I was like, man, I was so close. I'm like, we're on the
Bert.
same wavelength, me and Lower Decks.
And her sis and
Her sister was Erica.
yeah.
To Erica.
Yeah.
And Tindy is what? Devana?
Devana.
Devana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Devana.
But Bert and Erica had almost normal like American names.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And you could tell that Tindy clearly got a lot of her personality from her dad.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
That was made very clear.
Yeah. Now I liked that like Mariner was in this episode throughout, but she wasn't like super badass. She wasn't
Yeah.
beating everybody up. She just kept getting stabbed.
Yeah. In the same spot.
In the same spot.
Like the knife would just knew where to go.
Yeah.
She was great. And I am. We talked about this before. I am loving Talin's character.
Dude, everything Talin says, I laugh.
Yes. Me
It's
too.
the delivery as much as anything, but I mean,
Yeah.
she could
Yes.
say like, sensors are on, and I would be like,
Yeah.
good one, Talin.
And they do such a good job. I was laughing the whole show because she kept using that pad to record, and she would just so clinically talk about the Orions. You know, she's just basically analyzing them. It worked. It was just so funny. I thought she was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
her just little asides, and there was something like, who doesn't want to steal a ship? And she'd be like, I do not.
Yeah. Or when
No,
they were
who wants
talking
to
about
steal a ship?
Right.
yes. When they
Yeah.
were talking about Boimler and Rutherford basically becoming bros, and she said something like their emotional closeness is irritating or something or alarm or
Right.
something like that. But
Yeah.
she said it's so deadpan. It was just great.
And that one Orion guy, she said he is aesthetically pleasing.
Yes. That was as close to you get is he's really hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just I mean, that actor is just nailing every line. Her,
Absolutely.
her delivery is just perfect.
Yes. Yes.
And it just
Yeah.
makes everything funnier.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know about you guys, but nobody tried to kidnap me or my wife before we got married. I mean, it's not something that it's not a tradition I'm familiar with.
No, well, thankfully not. Yeah, I guess on Orion it's traditional. It's like boring. They're like, oh yeah, she got abducted, huh? That's just
Yeah.
the thing to abduct Orion women before the wedding. That's not the strangest Star Trek tradition we've heard of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. There's the Betazoids getting married naked.
True. Yeah.
Look naked. Right.
You tried.
Also,
Yeah.
yeah, did you catch that the mom said it was almost a dishonor because if they were going to kidnap her, they waited too long, almost like that
Yeah.
didn't make her valuable or
Right.
desirable.
Yeah. I did like the Star Trek graveyard where I guess Tendi would go as a kid and dream about being in Starfleet. And that ship that they took looked like the Raven to me. It looked like
Yes.
like Annika Hansen's family's ship, which
Mm.
I thought was
Yes.
like you don't have to do that. It could just be generic ship, but they go all out on these things and
Yeah.
like
They really do.
let's recreate something from the original from the Legacy series.
Yes.
So speaking of ways they go all out, were y'all paying
Mhm.
attention to what Boimler and Rutherford had on their shelves in their room?
Uh-uh.
So
There's
there
a
was
DS9?
there was a DS9, and I think
Uh-huh.
the box next to it was probably the box for the model because it also said Quarks
Yeah.
on it, and they may have gotten it at
Oh.
Quarks.
That was they did go to a Quarks and buy that.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
But
nice.
also there were 3 action figures. One of them was clearly Kirk in his green wraparound.
Was it
Nice.
Kirk or was it Mirror Archer in his wraparound?
Oh, I
Because
don't
last
know.
week he had a doll of Mirror Archer, or maybe it was the week before.
Okay, then it may have been that. It was
Okay.
it was a wraparound with brownish hair.
Okay.
And then there was someone else standing, and I don't think it was Spock because I feel like they had a gold uniform on,
Okay.
but it looked
Okay.
like they were standing and holding out their hands in the Vulcan symbol. And then
Mhm.
there was a Klingon with a batleth.
Okay.
And beside that was a it was some kind of plate, and I'm forgetting what it is now. It wasn't
Was it the Paris plate?
it was not the Paris plate.
Oh.
It was like the U.S. Federation of Planets
Okay.
plate that they had sitting on the shelf.
Yeah. Veronica was working from home today, so she had plenty of time to watch this over and over again.
Yes, I saw that there were things, and I actually went back just to watch those
good.
and look at them.
Good job.
Yeah.
Are collector plates like that still a thing? When I was coming up, you got a plate like that everywhere you went, like Six Flags and crap like that. Yeah.
I don't know if
they are as much.
I don't know. They did produce that Paris plate. We have one.
Yeah, we have one.
But I've thought about like I don't need to start buying things. I don't need to go down a rabbit hole, but I would love to just start buying the like corny old like Star Trek plates without like it'd be a Gowron and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the next time we do a get together at y'all's house, we can have Star Trek plates and those crazy two-tine space forks and the square glasses, and then you can put on a bowl of like soap to look like the food from the original series. You know, the colored soap.
Yeah, but we can't eat off of Star Trek plates, though. I don't think you're supposed to eat off of them.
No.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mistress of the Winter Constellation? Sorry, Charles.
Yeah, no, they've mentioned that before, back when the last time when she met her uncle or something. I think it was in that same Tom Paris episode when she and Marin were off on their adventure. They called her the Mistress of the Winter Constellations, which we got more context for this week. I don't know. I've just really enjoyed. I mean, it's a comedy show, but they're putting the time and effort into like world building and character building.
Yeah.
And I really, for me, Lower Decks really hits its mark when it's really funny, but it's funny doing things that they could have done on like the live action Star Trek shows. Right. And all of this felt like something you could have done on live action Star Trek, including the Mark Twain stuff in the holodeck.
So one of the Orion things we forgot to mention, which is slightly related to Lower Decks, is the Orions that were in the Those Old Scientists episode.
Yeah.
Because I remembered it because they called Tendi the Mistress of the Winter Wind, and that's how they knew who they were talking about.
Yeah, because Tendi's great grandmother was on that Orion ship.
Yeah.
And Charles, back to what you were saying again about how not all the women have the pheromone power, at least at that level. Again, I like it because they have removed the pheromones as 100% the control. Because notice when they went to that club, the bouncers were really mean and rude.
Yeah.
And if it was just pure pheromone power, they'll know that Tendi doesn't have it. If it was real pheromone power, it would have been different. Obviously, they have free will, but when they saw her, the dude literally groveled. He literally hit the ground. It's like, Mistress, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's just like that.
Yeah. And that's something they said about Tendi was that she didn't have the pheromones, but she didn't need them.
Yeah.
And I mean, that some people don't. I did like that they shortened it to the moans. And that's a nice double meaning. I'm here for the moans.
Yes. And the club was funny. They have that weird, what did they call it? The murder bug drinking game.
Yeah.
And then did you notice, Veronica, you talked about that knife finding mariner. Did you notice that the lady had a whole jar full of bloody knives?
Yeah. It's like that's just a thing. They occasionally throw around knives. It might hit you in the wrong place, or it might hit you in a place that doesn't matter too much. And if so, here you go.
Right.
You can put it in here.
Yeah. No, I think I loved this episode, start to finish.
I did too.
We got another Chalnoth, the dude from Allegiance. Do you remember the episode Allegiance of Next Generation when Picard was captured and it was those random people? And it was that one guy. Yeah, one of those guys.
I couldn't remember the race, and I kept looking at him, and I kept wanting to make him a Nausicaa. I was like, that's not a Nausicaa. Where is I've seen that dude.
Yeah. Which is a great pull because that's a really that was a great character.
Yes.
And I love him being dressed up like Mark Twain in the holodeck. I think even the captain was like, "What are we doing here? This makes no sense."
And evidently the captain was so irritated, they said later on that she forbade them to dress up like Mark Twain again.
Yeah.
They're banned from Mark Twain.
Whoa.
They had to be Beethoven or somebody at the end.
Yeah.
They're playing was a piano or a harpsichord, and Rutherford's like, this thing's really hard to play.
Yeah, it was a grand piano. Or
that was funny.
At the very least.
And, And the thing is, it's funny. Humor is good when you see it coming. You still laugh. I knew the dude was going to eat that bonsai tree.
Yeah.
But I still just laughed. And then, of course, he took the mist. I need some mist. And he drinks it. And then I love the thing where he's basically like, okay, I'm going to let you survey the nebula.
Yeah.
Pray I do not change my mind.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And then she goes, "You're really intimidating." He goes, "Thank you." And then they just walk away. I thought that was great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was fun. Really, really good. And even the thing with Tindy's sister made sense. You know, again, God, have we not seen that on everything from, I don't know what, the Brady Bunch to a family affair, to just name your show with two siblings. Of course, they just don't usually try to kill each other because it's like, you left me in here, and that's because I knew you were a better assassin than I'd be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's classic Star Trek
Yeah.
of
Absolutely.
having the bitterness between the sibling and
Hmm.
they make up at the end. I mean,
Hmm.
that's just perfect Star Trek to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also, as you were saying, Veronica, earlier, that how we've seen so much how Tindy's hiding who she is. If she's a trained assassin, basically like the leader of an assassin's guild on the fifth most powerful family in the syndicate, there's scary to think about how good she must really be. And we've
Oh
Yeah.
seen
yeah.
her, kick people every now and then, but man, she must be really good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I would love to see a Tendi who is free to be who she is, that the science nerd that she is,
Yeah,
but not hiding and not ashamed of who she was and where she comes from. Sort of, I would love to see them evolve Tendi into someone who can bring those things together.
yeah,
Especially if I mean, she said before that she wants to become a captain, and I feel like
right,
she would need both sides of herself to be a captain, right? You need a
absolutely.
captain who can, hijack a ship and kick people in the
Yeah,
face, as well as being a
yeah.
science nerd.
Yeah, because sometimes what Trek does, I think, well, and to bring up a really weird name, is Captain Jellicoe.
Hmm.
Is sometimes basically, dovetailing what you're saying, Charles. Sometimes what Star Trek actually needs is a captain who's not the spit and polished perfect captain. You
Sure,
need a
yeah.
captain for certain situations, certain parts of the galaxy, certain races. I
Right.
absolutely could see her going places Picard may not have succeeded as well in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, but we've seen it in everybody from Kirk to Cisco to Michael
Yeah.
Burnham. I mean,
Hmm.
sometimes the captain's got to beat somebody up.
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
you don't want a captain that gets beat up every week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She
Um,
should take some lessons from Mabinga.
true, right? But I mean, that might be a good arc for Tendi of
Hmm.
Hmm.
her, coming to terms with embracing her heritage while still
Right.
being who she wants to be.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That she doesn't have to choose.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
as long as Talin is there, I'll be,
Yeah.
I'll be fine.
Yes. I thought it was cool to Lynn threw the pad away at the end, though.
Yeah, and that was a good comment. That was,
Hmm.
documenting because they sort of twisted her arm in the beginning. She didn't want to go to this wedding, and they're
Yes.
like, "No, we should go. We should go. I'm going to come too. I'm going to come too. And, oh, I'm going to come and study your species." She's like, "Oh," but she's a pleaser, and so she agreed.
Hmm.
But I thought it was cool of Talin to say, studying a culture without consent isn't ethical, and just toss her pad out the window.
Yeah.
I thought that was good.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right. Well, do we have any closing thoughts about the Orions or about this week's episode before we close this thing out?
As I said earlier, I'm stunned that a comedy-based cartoon fleshed out a species that I have often loved.
Mm,
Because one of the things that I've loved about the Orions, there's another group, the Rigilians, the Rigel
right.
colonies. You hear this stuff, but you don't know. And I think in all the Star Trek species, two of the ones that are most interesting are the Orions and the Rigilians, because you just get this feeling they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that a comedic cartoon is fleshing them out in a satisfying way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to have lower decks tackle every major species now.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Keith, where can people find more of you?
You can find me on X and Instagram and Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
You're getting more comfortable saying X.
I know. I just, yeah, I just took a breath.
And how about us, Veronica?
Feltnerdy.com.
Yeah. And if you're in the Atlanta area, they've just announced the date for the Halloween Puck and Puppet Show, which is going to be October 14th this year. And it's for this year, for the first time since within the 11 years we've been doing it, it's going to be at the Center for Puppetry Arts.
Yeah.
On the main stage.
Yeah.
And so we're
Not
going to have,
daunting at all.
right. So we're going to have the opportunity to perform on the main stage at the Center for Puppetry Arts for the first time.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
It is. So if you're in the Atlanta area, come see us because we're planning to go big. We've got some routines planned that are going to be pretty wild.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it might be the first and last time we get to perform at the Center for Puppetry Arts. So if you're in the Atlanta area, mark your calendar for October 15th or October 14th and come, especially because the Puck and Puppet Show is it's voting. There's a cash prizes for the winners and it's audience voting. So if you've got people in the audience who are voting for you, you've got a better chance of winning. So I would love for everybody to come out and have a great time at the Center for Puppetry Arts and watch the Puck and Puppet Show because it's always a great show and vote for us.
Yes.
Nice.
All right. Where else can people find us, Veronica?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
That's right. And do you have a closing for us this week?
Don't worry. We know you're just a nerd.
That's good. That's a line for the show. Yes. Well done. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us in the comments. And we'll see everybody next week. We go live on Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, talking about a legacy Star Trek topic as well as the latest episode of the latest Star Trek series. So next week will be Lower Decks again, and I cannot wait. And we'll see. Maybe next week is the week that we all love very short treks. Who knows? All right. Bye, everybody.
See ya.